Welcome to Life L'Chaim. On today's episode, host Harry Silverman talks with Chabad Rabbi Pinchas Taylor about the power of positive thinking from a Jewish point of view. We'll be right back after these messages.
Welcome to Life L'Chaim. I'm your host, Harry Silverman. My guest tonight is Rabbi Pinchas Taylor, Chabad of Plantation. In 1952, Dr. Norman Vincent Peale wrote a book called The Power of Positive Thinking, which laid out the reasons why people should think positively. Rabbi Taylor, welcome to the show. I understand that you've been doing a lot of thinking and writing about this idea of positivity, positive thinking. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, I think positive thinking is something that is something that would be useful to people across all faith lines, and even people who don't identify with one specific faith. It's just something, sort of a backbone of a way that we operate, a way that is necessary to sort of get through life and sort of see life as a continuous opportunity.
So, give me some examples of that.
Well, in Judaism, I was always fascinated by the idea that, we all know as people that when we do something nice for somebody or we do something positive in the world, that positive action has a positive ripple effect. There was a movie several years ago that people always talk about to me, and that is the Pay It Forward movie. That when you do something right, it has a ripple effect, and people are just meant to keep paying it forward. So I was fascinated by the idea that in Judaism, not only does actions play a role in causing a positive ripple effect, but even our speech and even our thoughts. When I think of speech, for example, one of the things that comes to mind is that, for example, in Judaism we're taught that Lashon Hara, that speaking badly about somebody else, hurts three people. It hurts, number one, the person who said the thing that they shouldn't say, the person who listened to it, and the person that it was said about. So I always understood, I understand that the person who said it, why it hurts them, because they shouldn't be talking about those things. And the person who listened to it, I understand why it hurts them, because they shouldn't be listening to those types of things. But what about the person who it was about? If they never find out about it, how does it really hurt them? So Jewish tradition teaches that just by speaking negatively about somebody, it actually drags them down. So it's the speech itself, not the finding out about it, but the very speech itself, which transforms, in a sense, the reality and makes the person be brought down. And the same thing applies in the positive. When we say positive things about another person, that it uplifts them as well. The Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, one day was in his synagogue, and he heard two individuals fighting after the prayer service. And one of them got so upset with the other person that he tells them, "I'm going to tear you apart like a fish." And everyone in the synagogue, turned around and was very, surprised at such a statement. And the Baal Shem Tov gathered everybody in the synagogue around, told them to sort of stand in a circle and close their eyes. And when they closed their eyes, the Baal Shem Tov gave them sort of a guided meditation, and everyone began to shriek. And what they saw with their closed eyes in this sort of guided meditation was this individual actually tearing apart the other individual like a fish. And the Baal Shem Tov's point was that when we say words, our words carry meaning, and even if they don't affect the actual, tangible, physical world, that there is some realm that the words take effect in. That our words carry with it more than just the meaning of the words that we speak, that they actually have some sort of tangible reality in some realm.
So, outside of the Jewish specific world, are there examples of where positivity, thinking positive, has a positive effect on people's lives, on people themselves?
Sure. Well, we were talking about speech, so I remember there was a few years ago, it must have been about a decade ago now, that there was a Japanese scientist named Masaru Emoto, and he did an ice crystals experiment. And what he did was he took a jar and took water from a spring, and then they took some of that water from the spring and they put it into two cups, and over one cup they took it into an area, and the people were saying over the cup very nice things. They were saying, you're so nice, you're so good looking, thank you very much, please, all of the nice things that you would say to another person. And with the other cup, they had a group that was saying negative things over it. I hate you, you're stupid, whatever one might think. All sorts of negative things. And then they took the contents, the water that was inside, put it in a Petri dish, and froze it, made it into ice crystals. Then they would examine the ice crystals through the lens of a microscope, magnifying it maybe 200 or 300 times and seeing what the result was. And the result was that on the ones that had negative things said over it, the water that people were talking negatively over, the ice crystals that developed were very jagged. They were very they were all over the place and didn't have any symmetry to them. Whereas the ones the ice crystals that had formed with the positive things said over it had these these very nice ornate ice crystals, like you would see come wintertime. You see like that perfect snowflake picture. That's what you see. I was impressed by that. Not so much for the experiment itself, but just the fact that even in secular society, we're talking about the fact that words have an effect on tangible reality.
That's fascinating. I had never heard that speech actually had an effect on something concrete as water when it crystallized. Are there other secular type examples of this that you can think of? Sure.
Well, with regard to speech also, you have there was an Israeli chemist, Tomer Rabiev, I think, and Arik Naveh, and they did a similar experiment where they spoke positively over water that they used to water lima beans, and negatively over water that they used to water lima beans. And the ones where good stuff was said tended to grow better and faster and healthier and greener than the ones that had negative. But even in the realm of thought, from a secular perspective, I'll never forget a cardiologist friend of mine once told me about an experiment that was done. It was like a double-blind experiment on children who had terminal illness. And what they did was they took a certain segment of the group and they told them to play Pac-Man. Remember Pac-Man from the 80s? He was a little chompy guy who was eating like the food. And so what they told these kids was that you pretend that you are Pac-Man and the little chompy food things are your cancer. And as you're chomping away, that your cancer is being eaten away as well. Your disease is being eaten away as well. And they found that the children that participated in this experiment, their results tended to be better than they were previously.
Last time we talked a little bit about positive thinking in general and scientific elements. Tell us a little bit more about the specific Torah aspects of positivity and positive thinking.
So the Torah is really replete with examples of positive thinking and how positive thinking affects the world and sort of how it shapes our outlook. In the Torah context of positive thinking, the Talmud says Ein Tov Ela Torah, which means the Torah is the ultimate good. So if a person really wants to have positive thinking and a positive outlook on life, the instruction is, well, fill your mind with some Torah. Fill your mind with that kind of positivity, and negativity disappears. One example of that where we see that in the Torah is with Joseph and his brothers. There's a famous story where where Joseph is sort of the favored child, and ostensibly his brothers are jealous of him, and they decide that they're going to throw him in a pit. Now, when the Torah describes the pit that Joseph is thrown into, the Torah says that the pit was empty and there was no water in it. Now, the Torah doesn't mince any words, and the fact that it uses this redundancy, it was empty, it didn't have any water in it, seems, overkill, right? If it's empty, I know there's no water in it. So the Torah commentaries say that what the Torah means is that it was empty of anything. It was empty of water, but it was filled with snakes and scorpions, right? So the emptiness was emptiness of water. It was a pit that was not filled with water, but it had snakes and scorpions in it. And that is seen as a lesson for our own lives as well. Our brain is sort of like the empty pit. And if our pit is not filled with water, if our pit is not filled with positivity, with Torah, right, the result is going to be that it's going to be filled with snakes and scorpions. So if we don't actively put positivity into our brains, then the result is going to be snakes and scorpions. It's going to be negative and things that guide us in the wrong direction.
Interesting. What other examples are there from the Torah or from the rabbis about positive thinking as opposed to being negative?
Sure. Well, there's a famous Talmudic story with Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Akiva used to have a mantra that Kol Avid Rachmana L'Tav Avid. Everything God does, He does for good. And so one of the time he was going to a town in Roman times, and he was seeking lodging in a place that wasn't his town. He would knock on each door, and every door that he would knock on, there was some excuse why he couldn't spend the night there, or they were full, whatever it was. And so Rabbi Akiva decided, what, Kol Da'avid Rachmana L'Tav Avid, everything God does, He does for good. And he went to go sleep in the field. When he was out in the field, he traveled with a donkey that he could carry his stuff with. He traveled with a rooster that he could wake up on time, and he traveled with a candle that he could study Torah at night. When he got in the field, a wind came by and blew out his candle. He couldn't study Torah anymore. A fox came along and ate his rooster. Now he couldn't wake up on time. And then a larger animal came along and ate his donkey. And he couldn't carry his stuff, so he's staying in the field. He's all alone. He's having a terrible night. But he remembered his mantra, Kol Da'avid Rachmana L'Tav Avid. Everything God does, He does for good. He said, okay, fine. He went to sleep that night, and that was that. Comes around in the morning, he realizes what had happened, that in the city, the Romans had come and they had ransacked the city. People were murdered, and raped, and all sorts of terrible things. And if he would have found lodging there, he would have been a part of that. He would have been caught up in that as well. And meanwhile, if he were in the field and his donkey would have heard the commotion, or his rooster would have heard the commotion, they would have made some noise and made the Romans come out to the field also. So he remembered this concept, Kol Da'avid Rachmana L'Tav Avid. Everything that happens is ultimately for the best, and that is what helped him to get through the tough times that he went through.
So before we take our next break, we have time for one more. Give us one more example of this.
Sure. So, with the story of Rabbi Akiva, interestingly enough, his mantra, Kol Da'avid Rachmana L'Tav Avid, everything God does, He does for good. From a Kabbalistic perspective, a lot of people are into Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism these days. So in Jewish mysticism, all of the letters of the Hebrew alphabet are equated with a certain number. So Aleph, the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, is equal to 1, Base is 2, and so forth. And so the Rabbi Akiva's mantra, and you want to take a guess, his mantra, Kol Da'avid Rachmana L'Tav Avid, everything God does, He does for good, how much that equals? It's 611, right? Which is the same as Torah, the word Torah. Meaning, if a person fills their mind with Torah concepts, you fill your mind with Torah and that type of positivity, that you'll see the world in that type of way.
So I would have thought maybe 613, but...
Close, right. Very, yeah. So the main thing to remember, I think, and this goes back to Joseph and his brothers, if you have a big cauldron of the worst things in the world. Imagine a witch's brew, right? And you can't lift it. It's a very heavy thing to lift. So you say, listen, I'm a negative person by nature. I can't deflect my thoughts. What I am is what I am, and that's who I am. Right? I'm filled with snakes and scorpions. How do I operate in the world? How can I be a more positive person?
We spoke a bit about the secular world and the idea of positive thinking. We spoke a little bit about the Torah's view of positive thinking. But let's talk now about some specific examples, practical things that people in their everyday lives could use to enhance their lives.
So one thing off the bat, and I think we started talking about this last time, is a lot of people say, I tend to be just a negative person in general. I feel like it's sort of like a weight that I can't overcome. I can't lift all this negativity out of me. How do I inculcate positivity into my lifestyle, right? So a few weeks ago, my wife got the kids one of those like kiddie pools, right? Those plastic pools that you fill up in your backyard. So of course my kids decided that they didn't want to fill it with water. They put rocks and dirt and all sorts of stuff in, and they turned it into basically a sandbox. So my wife asked me, if I can empty it out and make it into a pool, because they wanted to go swimming. And so I lifted it up. I tried lifting it. It was really, really heavy. I really couldn't lift it. As buff as I am, I just couldn't do it. So what I did to make it easier is I stuck the hose directly into the pool, turned the hose on, and what happened is a lot of the dirt and the mud and everything started coming out. And the only thing that was left in, after a while, was maybe one or two big rocks that just didn't come out, and I just took them out by hand. The point is that if there's something that we don't think that we can lift ourselves and get rid of, the idea is not to fight the negative, not to try and dump out all the dirt. It's to just add in water, add the positivity, surround yourself in positive environment with positive people, right? And study positive works, open a Torah book, and that is what will gain positive influence into our life.
Go ahead. Do you have other examples of that?
Yeah, I think one way to think about it, many people ask, well, how does just thinking positive about something, how does that actually change the positive results, right? Obviously, there's wishful thinking, but how is it practically, logistically, that just by thinking about something that it actually changes the nature of reality? Here's the way I see it, okay? From a physics point of view, the world operates on many dimensions, right? The first dimension is just, 1 point, 1 line, one-dimensional reality. Two-dimensional reality would be like a photograph, right? We talked earlier about Pac-Man. Pac-Man is a two-dimensional game. He only knows left, right, up, and down, just length and width, right? So in 2D world, the photograph man or the painting man or Pac-Man, right, only knows left, right, up, and down, right? Length and width. The idea of there being a third dimension is beyond his scope, right? So we live in the third dimension where there's length and width and also height. There's also depth. So for us, third dimensional reality, right, with length, width, and depth is what we're used to, and that's normal for us, right? But for us to think of what it would look like in the fourth dimension, what 4D reality would be like, is beyond our comprehension. What would 4D reality look like for a second?
Good, I was going to ask.
Right, yeah. So what would it look like? If you could put on your 4D glasses, how would that look? So 4D glasses would look, the fourth dimension is time. So if you could put on 4D glasses, time would have no significant meaning. And what that means is if you were to look at another person, let's say we're looking at each other, now you're looking at me with 4D glasses, so you would see me throughout the course of my entire life, from the beginning of my life to the end of my life, in one simultaneous moment, right? Everything from beginning to end, from womb to tomb, in one simultaneous moment. So if I looked at the world, I'd see everything from the beginning of time to the end of time existing in one simultaneous moment. Everything on the timeline. Okay? Now, the fifth dimension is where it gets, that's where we're going to stop or else our heads explode. The fifth dimension is where it gets very interesting. And this is where positive thinking comes in. So 4D reality, again, is you see everything that ever happened on the timeline, from the beginning to the end, in the whole timeline as one simultaneous moment, right? Everything that actually transpired and ever will transpire, existing at one time. The fifth dimension says anywhere on that timeline, at any given moment, there's an infinite amount of possibilities that could have happened, right? So the only one thing practically can happen, but in the fifth dimension, all of the possibilities, all the infinite amount of possibilities at every second that could have happened also exist, also go into play. So in the realm of positive thinking, only one thing can take place in action. But where is one place that we can sort of tap into all of the infinite amount of possibilities that possibly could exist at any given moment? In our thought. At our thought, in the realm of thought, in the reality of thought, all of the infinite amount of possibilities that could possibly happen in any given moment can be conjured up in one's brain. And by thinking about it, just by harnessing onto a given scenario, we bring, out of all the infinite possible realities, we bring one specific reality a little bit closer to the actual tangible physical reality. That's sort of the mechanics of positive thinking, how it works.
So, if I understand, this fifth dimension is everything that could happen at any given moment, and what you're suggesting is that if we think about all of the different possibilities and think positively about the one that we really want, we can help make that happen.
Correct. It brings, out of all the infinite amount of possible futures, it's like a choose your own fate book, right? You have all these possibilities, right? You choose, only one can come out in practice, right? But there's lots to choose from. So with all the infinite amount of possible realities that could be, just by thinking about it, it's an amazing power that we have. We actually help harness that particular future or that particular circumstance into the practical physical reality.
It's fascinating. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. I know that I was fascinated by what you had to say. I'm sure our viewers share that as well, and I look forward to speaking with you some more.